What you are about to listen to is me, Pastor Michael Bowman, as I think out loud about and try to apply the scripture to anything and everything that comes to mind. This usually happens in my car, so jump in and let's talk. So this is going to be interesting because my studio where I record, which is just my car, it is having an issue where I don't have power steering. And so typically when I record these, I'm driving and it is easy to hold my phone in one hand in order to keep it, somewhat at a proper distance from my mouth. But right now, I am just gonna do what I can. There might be times I have to put the phone down. I don't know, but this is what the authentic experience is all about. So I've been thinking just lately, I actually had this note written down, and I was kind of just browsing through my Google Keeps documents where I keep things like a list of guns I want to buy, or just random funny ideas that I think of, and things that I would like to talk about, write about, things like that. I was browsing through it the other day, and I came across this note where I wrote down something to the effect of thinking about linear and cyclical timelines. And when we think of life in a linear fashion, how that can sometimes be problematic. And let me explain further, because when I say that, I think it'll freak some people out. I actually believe that, obviously on the long-term time frame, with history being a story that God himself has written already and is now, telling that we're engaged in, that we're a part of, this is something that is linear, in that there's a beginning, there's an end, and, everything in the middle is moving toward that end. So in that sense, time is very linear. And even in our own personal lives, we could look back at times of sanctification and look back over our lives and see the sanctifying work of God in our hearts and in our lives, to such an extent that maybe on a day-to-day basis we might not feel very encouraged about where we're at, spiritually speaking. But when we actually look at this longer, time frame, we can see the growth of in godliness and righteousness in our lives, all by the grace of God, all by his work in us. However, I do think that there's something to a somewhat more cyclical mindset, or thinking of time in slightly more cyclical terms. And I think that this is more, in a lot of ways, how we grow. And what I mean by that is that there's this kind of constant, repetition and repeat, and, this is tradition. This is habits, the forming of habits, just this kind of repetition in our lives. We go back time and time again. It's like seasons as they change, but they repeat. So there's movement, there's change, but that change is something that continues to come back and recycle, in a sense, over and over again. And I think much of our spiritual lives is like this. So there's a constant, going back to things we already know, that we should already know, that we've already learned, and finding within them something that is, even deeper and more profound, and that shapes us all the more, even though we had already, studied this text, or heard these words, or prayed this prayer. But going back to these things over and over again, and returning to them season after season, this is the way that a lot of growth actually happens. And I think if we look at things on a purely linear time frame in our individual lives, that can kind of obscure this way that we grow. It's the way that we learn. It can obscure and I think ultimately lead to a kind of discouragement, where we're coming back to something again that we need again, that we feel like, oh, I should be past this, I should be beyond this, I should know this by now. But this is just how God has made us in many ways. So having just the weekly Sabbath, weekly routines, regular routines, traditions, and these cycles and seasons, this is how we grow. It's not usually in a straight line. Though on the biggest of time frames, you might be able to see it in a kind of progressive straight line. It really does not come across that way at all experientially. And in our day-to-day lives, that's really just not how it works. So you think of something that's just a lot more organic, like the growth of a forest. This is something that grows slowly, and it does grow toward a particular end. But there are, there are things that happen that kind of change the way the forest is growing, or where the trees, which trees are planted where, and how the different, trees are propagating. There's different seasons where, maybe they grow a lot faster or a lot slower. And so just seeing that as a much more, even just the seasons themselves again, that there are seasons of high growth, and then there are seasons of little to no growth. There are seasons of bearing a lot of seed or fruit, but then there are also seasons where there's very little of that. And if we look things as purely like this, industrialized counting system where we're just constantly improving the efficiency and the numbers, we're just constantly improving our spiritual lives along this straight line. I don't think that is going to be very encouraging, because at least for the vast majority of people, that's just not how it's going to play out. That's not what it's going to look like. But if, on the short term, we think more cyclically in this way, at least the way that I'm using it, and maybe you'll say, oh, this isn't really how I think of these terms anyway. That's okay. That's all right. I'm just thinking out loud here. But maybe if we thought more cyclically on a shorter time frame, this could help us understand more what the kind of typical spiritual growth looks like. It's much more organic. It's much more ebbs and flows. It's much more seasonal. But it is something that on the bigger time frame, if we look at the bigger time frame, there is something obviously problematic with a purely cyclical model, because there is an end. There is a telos. There is something that we're moving toward, growing into. There's something that we're supposed to be. This is C.S. Lewis at the beginning of The Great Divorce, where he talks about how the longer something grows, the longer a tree grows, it becomes more and more distinctly itself. It becomes more and more distinctly a tree, and what it's supposed to be all along. I think that's true of us as well. And so, short time frame, the linear thinking, I just don't think is going to work. This is kind of like the myth of progress, right? That everything's just getting better over time, and everything's improving. That's a modern progressive mindset. It's not necessarily true. There are truths in it. There are true elements of it, but it is still very problematic. However, on the long time frame, we do want to say, yep, Christ is reigning and ruling, that he's going to return someday, and he will have accomplished everything that he set out to accomplish. Every enemy under his feet, even death itself, will be destroyed at his coming. And so there is an end to all of this. There is a place that everything is growing toward and moving toward. However, that is not always what our individual lives look like on the day-to-day. And so I don't know if this is helpful or encouraging. I hope it is. And maybe you can find some kind of nugget of truth in here that will bless you today. Anyway, I guess I'll be done there.
Hey guys, I hope this has been helpful for you. If it has been, go ahead and rate it, review it, or share it with a friend, especially if you're in La Crosse, Wisconsin, or the surrounding areas. That helps me expand the audience and hopefully increase the impact of these ideas. If you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns on anything that I just talked about, you can reach me at PastorMichaelJBowman@gmail.com. You can find more content from me, as well as information about the church that I pastor at ccc-pca.org. With that, I hope you can enjoy the many blessings of God today. Until next time.